Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. Now I know that looked like a lot of eggs there. We're starting off with 16 eggs, but that is because I am going to be making 2 different number cakes today. However, in this tutorial, we are going to be focusing on the number 4 princess cake that I made for my best friend's daughter. You can really use any cake recipe that you want. I'm just using my classic tried and true vanilla cake recipe, and then later on in the video I am going to be adding a bunch of sprinkles to make this funfetti. Really, any recipe will do. You can even use box cake mix for this as well. What I'm going to be showing you today is not how to make the cake, but how to actually decorate and assemble this entire cake. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you start off with a really nice solid base. Today I'm using 2 half-sheet pans from Fat Daddy-O's. It's one of the best companies for pans. I find that everything bakes really nice and evenly. This is not a sponsored video, but I've tried lots of different pans, and by far they are my favorite because they bake very, very evenly. Now I am using some Crisco here, which is a little bit of shortening all over the pans, and you will notice that I put all of that shortening on the pan, and then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to place some parchment down, and I'm going to put more shortening on there. Now, this might seem like I'm overdoing it a little bit with the greasing, but I cannot tell you how many times in the early years of my baking career that I constantly had cakes sticking and then it would ruin the whole thing and I'd have to fix it with buttercream. So this way we just kind of stay on top of it and grease everything. You also want to make sure that the parchment is sitting super flat, so you don't want any creases in there. The flatter you get this parchment, the better everything is going to sit, and we really want these cakes to be flat. We do not want them to dome up. This is also why I'm using rectangular pans as opposed to square pans or any other shape. I just find when I use square pans that are a little bit deeper, or circular pans, which really wouldn't work anyway for a number cake, it just puffs up a little bit more. So I find with the lower edge here, we're really going to get a really nice flat cake, which is what we need because we're going to be carving a number, or you might choose to carve a letter in your cake as well. Here's a little baking tip. I find people run into trouble when it comes to cakes. They don't bake up properly when things are over mixed. So I always like to mix by hand, even though I'm mixing a really large amount this time around. I just find I have more control and I can get a good feel for the batter. I really just mix until there are slightly fewer lumps and everything is combined. Now, normally I would never do this with cake, but again, we're aiming to get this cake nice and flat. So I do give it quite a few taps there to make sure that everything is nice and even. I bake this at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, nice and low and slow for approximately 25 to 30 minutes. Now, prior to actually putting the cake all together, I want to make sure that I have all my decorations done. So you could either choose to use store-bought things that are just either little toys, or you can put little Lindt chocolates on there that are in the color theme that you want. I am opting to do sugar cookies, which is actually a lot more work. However, I was already making a batch of sugar cookies, so it wasn't that big of a deal that I was just adding these on. If you want to know how I make my sugar cookies, you can go ahead and check out this link in the upper right-hand corner. And I'm keeping things really simple by using a pipe and flood consistency. And again, if you want to know what that means, go ahead and check out that video in the right-hand corner. Now, our cakes are completely cooled. This is super important, especially for this size of cake. Sometimes you can get away with it when it's a smaller 6-inch, when it's still kind of warm. You want to make sure that the pan is completely cooled before you try any tricks like this. And I am giving it a little tap like that. Fat Daddy-O pans are great because it can withstand that. I find that other brands, when I try to do that, it indents it and then your pan is pretty much done for. You can never get that same shape, and we really want to make sure that all of our pans remain nice and flat so we get nice and flat layers with our cake. Now I'm just piping on little details, again using that pipe and flood consistency. I'm not changing any of my consistency for my sugar cookies. And then of course, you guys know what's coming next. It's the edible glitter. I love this stuff. I'm going to use it in a fairly overzealous manner, but feel free to use it sparingly. So what I'm doing here is I am going to actually fill this again with pipe and flood once I've already had that pipe and flood underneath fully dried out, and then I'm going to put on a bunch of this edible glitter and shake the excess off. This is very satisfying. It also gives me those vibes when you were like in kindergarten or grade 1 and you got to shake the glitter on the glue. It's really the same concept. Now I'm just taking the same pipe and flood consistency and adding in a few details for our magical wand. Keep in mind that your details don't have to be super refined for this because it is going to go on a cake. I have made really elaborate cakes for my friends' kids over the years, and this one is very simple. So I decided to go that extra step further, and I'm going to make her a chocolate shoe here. Why I ever tried to mess around with fondant shoes and fondant shoe molds, I don't know why, because honestly, they're always a headache. Sometimes they turn out, but the predictability of that is just so low. So I have now fully switched over to just using these chocolate molds, because every single time you're going to get a beautiful, perfect shoe, and you can add as many details as you would like to it. That shoe is just going to set in the freezer for a few minutes, and it's going to pop out all beautifully. Right now, I'm going to be mixing up a little bit more of those candy melts, and I've added a little bit of colorant, and I'm using Color Mill today. Really love their color line. I've done a full review on their products before. It is definitely not my go-to. However, I do like their color line for chocolate, and they have really beautiful shades. And I really needed some beautiful shades for this Cinderella / princess themed cake. I had some leftover cake, so I put it into some cake pop molds. This one was a star mold, super pretty. And then I'm going ahead and I'm just going to dip that directly into the chocolate. And I have cut down the sticks a little bit. You can also buy really short cake pop sticks. I had the long ones, so I cut them down. I put a little bit of that chocolate on the end to insert into the cake pop so it stays on there and doesn't fall off as soon as you try to eat it. And then I'm going ahead and dipping it. Now, if you're noticing that the chocolate is too thick, maybe things are kind of looking like elephant skin as you pull that chocolate out, that's a sign that your chocolate may be just a slight bit too thick. So you want to thin that out with a flavorless oil. You can use a vegetable oil, canola oil, or coconut oil, anything that is flavorless and won't affect the taste of that chocolate. Now, ordinarily, I would put this in styrofoam or a cake pop stand to dry, but I'm going to be placing this on the cake, so I'm not too concerned. So I'm just laying it flat. If that is a concern for you, definitely use a styrofoam block. Now, I did have to place the entire cake on the floor because in order to get this to project large enough, it had to go on the floor. So I had to sanitize that whole area that I'm in right there to make sure that everything would remain food safe. And I'm just going ahead projecting that image on. There's so many ways to do this. You can print templates and then you can just carve around that. But I just find a projector is easier because I don't have to mess with the printer. It would have been several sheets of paper, especially because I only have 8.5 by 11 paper. So projecting is just the easiest way. You can also freehand this. When I used to work with my friend, I would freehand things all the time. I just wanted to make sure that I was going to get the most out of this cake. Now, when I released the short featuring this cake, so many people asked me, why didn't you put icing on the sides? It doesn't look good without the icing on the side. Where is the flavor? Where is the filling? Guys, keep in mind, I do make big projects like this for other people. So when possible, I do like to give the recipients of these cakes the choice of what type of flavors they want. And my friend requested that she wanted a funfetti cake with just plain vanilla buttercream through and through. This was mainly going to be fed to children, and compotes and ganaches, too complicated for them. They just love the regular vanilla buttercream. But you guys are free to add whatever you want in here. Just make sure that you add a border like I did, and then instead of filling it completely in with buttercream, go ahead and fill it in with a compote, ganache, a mousse. That would be absolutely delicious. As for the naked cake look on the side, that was purely by request. She really did not want to have any icing on the side. She wanted to be able to see that really beautiful piping in the center. Now, if you are worried about things drying out, go ahead and brush it with a little bit of simple syrup. So that's 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of hot water. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. And then you just want to dissolve that and brush it on. Of course, you're going to want to use warm water because it won't dissolve if it's not warm enough. Now, there's really not too much different technique that I'm using when creating these buttercream patterns. I just kind of grabbed whatever tips I felt were going to work. I used a petal tip, I used a French tip, and then I also used a classic 1M tip, and I'm just kind of swirling it in different directions. Be creative with this part. You're really not going to see a lot of the detail. I mean, that's completely up to you. Some people do like to leave it bare like this, where it just has the beautiful frosting. Because I'm going to be adding a lot of toppings on here, it doesn't matter as much. The main idea with this section, though, is you want to make sure that you're getting full coverage. So you'll notice that I did place a lot of the rosettes first, and then I just filled in. And using small tips like the French tip to kind of create those dots, or star tipping it, which you can do with your 1M tip, will really help fill in those gaps. We just want to make sure that we don't see any cake on the top portion. Now, one word of advice, this takes up a lot more frosting than you think. You are going to need quite a bit to get this detail on there, especially if you're using buttercream to fill the cake as well. You can also use canned frosting for this too. I'm using Italian meringue buttercream, but if you just whip up some canned frosting, make sure you whip it, you will be able to achieve the same type of look. Now comes the fun part where you get to put the toppings all over the cake. Now, some people don't like a whole lot of toppings. You'll see in my next number cake that I'm going to show you in another tutorial, I'm actually very limited with my topping. I just felt like for this particular design, I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to put on here. It was supposed to be a Cinderella themed cake, so I really needed to put different things on here to make sure that it still sold that theme without being so overtly Cinderella. And if you are so inclined, macarons are a great topper for these cakes because you can freeze them and you can make them in advance. These ones I made in advance and they're filled with a strawberry compote. I debated about leaving the cake pop sticks out so that you could actually just pick it up off of the cake, but I'm glad that I stuck them in this way because it gave me a little bit more movement and I was able to make the stars kind of sticking out of the cake just a little bit more. I decided that Cinderella's shoe just needed a little bit more oomph, so of course I grabbed that glitter and I placed this on. There's a few ways to make a really glittery shoe. If you wanted this to be super glittery, then what I would suggest is you heat it with a torch just very, very quickly, and then you can cover the whole thing in glitter. I just wanted it to be a little bit glittery, so I went ahead and I brushed that on there, and the glitter does stick to that chocolate. Last finishing touches of the writing here, and I apologize for this horrible angle. It was a little bit difficult for me to get myself writing on this, but I'm just using a little bit of buttercream for that writing there. And here we have the finished product. Now let's get into the pricing of this cake, and the pricing is fairly straightforward because we have so many toppings on this and it's quite a large cake. This would be $250 Canadian as a custom order only with a dollar minimum, meaning your bakery might have a different dollar minimum than $250. It might be $400, it might be $500. I know some people that have a dollar minimum of $700. So it really just depends on what your bakery has to offer for that. Now let's get into the subscriber submission of the video. I am blown away by this cake. I love the punchy colors, and you guys know I'm a sucker for gold, so be sure to check them out on Instagram. And if you want to be the next featured subscriber submission of the video, then please follow me at SD Bake Shop on Instagram, where you can either tag me in a photo or send me a photo. Any and all dessert levels are welcome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!